The silent vault theory, how the rich make money by doing nothing tonight. I'm going to reveal something that will fundamentally change how you see money, power, and the invisible architecture that governs our world. What you're about to discover exists in the shadows of financial markets, hidden behind layers of legal complexities so sophisticated that even most bankers don't fully understand them. This is the story of the silent vault theory, where the wealthiest individuals on Earth have constructed a parallel financial universe where money multiplies without effort, without risk, and most importantly, without accountability. Picture this: while you sleep, while you work, while you struggle to pay your bills, there are human beings whose wealth increases by millions every single hour through mechanisms you've never heard of. They don't trade stocks, they don't run businesses in the traditional sense, and they certainly don't rely on salary or wages. Instead, they've discovered something far more powerful, something that makes them virtually untouchable by economic downturns, market crashes, or even government interventions. They've learned to make money from the very concept of money itself. What I'm about to show you isn't taught in business schools, isn't discussed in mainstream financial media, and certainly isn't something your financial advisor will ever mention. This is the underground economy of the ultra-wealthy, a system so elegantly designed that it operates completely beyond the reach of traditional oversight. We're talking about a financial ecosystem where trillions of dollars flow through structures that technically don't exist, managed by entities that have no names, controlled by people who appear nowhere in public records. The rabbit hole begins with a simple question that haunts every serious investigator of global finance. How do the richest people on Earth pay lower tax rates than middle-class workers? The answer isn't what you think. It's not about tax loopholes or aggressive accounting. It's about something far more fundamental. It's about the complete transformation of wealth itself into something that transcends traditional categories of income, assets, or even legal ownership. Let me take you into the world of offshore financial architecture, where money doesn't just hide, it evolves into something entirely different. When we talk about offshore companies, most people imagine shady shell corporations and tropical tax havens, but that's kindergarten-level thinking. The real offshore system is a sophisticated network of interlocking legal entities that can transform the very nature of wealth ownership. These aren't just companies. They're financial metamorphosis chambers, where regular assets enter and emerge as something completely untraceable and untaxable. Consider the elegant beauty of a properly structured Bermuda-based insurance captive owned by a Cayman Islands holding company, which itself is controlled by a Luxembourg SRL, ultimately benefiting a Swiss discretionary trust with protectors in Monaco and Singapore. Each layer serves a specific function. The insurance captive generates legitimate business income while providing massive deductions. The Cayman holding company ensures zero corporate taxation. The Luxembourg entity provides European legitimacy and banking access, while the Swiss trust guarantees absolute privacy and asset protection. The beneficial owners, they exist nowhere in this chain, protected by attorney-client privilege and bank secrecy laws that make government investigations virtually impossible. But offshore companies are just the foundation. The real sophistication begins with international trust structures that operate like financial black holes, absorbing assets and making them disappear from any tax authority's radar. We're talking about discretionary trusts in jurisdictions like Cook Islands or Nevis, where local laws make it legally impossible for foreign courts to penetrate the ownership structure. These trusts can hold assets for centuries, passing wealth through generations without ever triggering inheritance taxes, capital gains obligations, or even basic reporting requirements. The genius lies in the legal separation of ownership and control. A billionaire can settle assets into these trusts, retain practical control through carefully structured protector mechanisms, and yet legally own nothing. When tax authorities investigate, they find empty shells. When creditors pursue claims, they encounter legal walls that cannot be breached. When journalists try to trace ownership, they discover labyrinthine structures that lead nowhere. The wealth exists. It generates returns. It provides lifestyle funding. But according to every legal system on earth, it belongs to no one. Now, let me reveal something that will make your blood run cold. The numbered account system in Swiss private banks isn't just about hiding money from tax authorities. It's about creating financial identities that exist completely outside the normal economic framework. When the ultra-wealthy open these accounts, they're not just depositing funds. They're creating alternate financial personalities that can operate independently of their legal existence. Think about the implications. These numbered accounts can trade currencies, buy and sell securities, invest in hedge funds, acquire real estate, and conduct complex derivative transactions, all without any connection to the beneficial owner's legal identity. The Swiss bank becomes the legal counterparty to every transaction, while the true controller remains completely anonymous. This isn't just privacy. It's financial ghosting at an institutional level. The Swiss have perfected this system over centuries, creating a banking infrastructure that operates like a parallel universe. Money enters Switzerland through one identity and emerges through another. Wealth can be restructured, repackaged, and redirected through mechanisms that exist completely outside international banking regulations. When American or European investigators demand account information, they're asking about people who technically don't exist within the Swiss system. But here's where it gets truly sinister. These Swiss accounts aren't passive storage devices. They're active wealth multiplication engines. The private banks use their clients' funds to engage in proprietary trading, currency, arbitrage, and complex derivative strategies that generate returns completely invisible to global financial markets. Your wealth doesn't just sit there. It becomes part of a sophisticated trading operation that leverages privileged information, central bank relationships, and market-moving positions to generate returns that would be impossible for ordinary investors. If you've followed me this far, if you're beginning to understand the true scope of what we're discussing, then I need you to do something right now. This information isn't freely available anywhere else. The research behind what I'm sharing with you has taken years to compile from sources most people will never encounter. If this video is opening your eyes to realities you never imagined, hit that like button and share this with someone who still believes the financial system operates according to the rules they teach in economics textbooks, because what you're about to discover makes everything we've discussed so far look elementary. The real sophistication in modern wealth concealment comes through family office structures that operate like private governments. These aren't just investment management companies. They're comprehensive wealth ecosystems that provide every service a billionaire family could possibly need while maintaining complete opacity. A properly structured family office employs hundreds of professionals, private bankers, tax attorneys, citizenship consultants, art advisors, private intelligence operatives, and even personal security teams. But here's what makes them truly powerful. They operate under attorney-client privilege, making their activities completely protected from external investigation. These family offices don't just manage money, they create reality. They can establish new companies in multiple jurisdictions within days, structure complex transactions that appear legitimate to regulatory authorities while serving entirely different purposes, and maintain parallel accounting systems that show whatever needs to be shown to whatever authority asks. When a family office client needs to make a massive acquisition, purchase a government bond, or even influence a political outcome, the family office handles everything through layers of intermediaries that make the true source of funding impossible to trace. The most sophisticated family offices operate what insiders call treasury functions, essentially becoming private central banks for their ultra-wealthy clients. They issue their own credit instruments, maintain currency reserves in dozens of jurisdictions, and engage in arbitrage operations that rival sovereign wealth funds. When you understand this level of financial sophistication, you begin to realize that the wealthiest individuals don't just participate in the global economy. They operate their own parallel economies that interact with the mainstream system only when convenient. Let me share something that will haunt your understanding of recent history. The Panama Papers, released in 2016, revealed the tip of an iceberg, so massive that most people couldn't comprehend its true size. Over 11 million documents exposed a network of offshore companies, trusts, and foundations that facilitated tax avoidance, money laundering, and sanctions evasion on a scale that dwarfs the GDP of most countries. But here's what the mainstream media missed. The Panama Papers represented only one law firm, in one jurisdiction, over a limited time period. What we discovered was approximately 1% of the actual offshore economy. Mossack Fonseca, the law firm at the center of the scandal, was a mid-tier player in the offshore services industry. The major firms that structure wealth for royal families, sovereign wealth funds, and multi-generational fortunes never appeared in those documents, because they operate at levels of sophistication that make Mossack Fonseca look like a corner grocery store. These top-tier firms don't leave paper trails, don't maintain centralized databases, and certainly don't store sensitive information in hackable computer systems. The Paradise Papers, leaked the following year, provided additional glimpses into this shadow world, revealing how major corporations, celebrities, and politicians used offshore structures to minimize tax obligations and hide asset ownership. But again, these revelations only scratched the surface. The most significant offshore structures never appear in leaked documents because they're designed by legal teams that understand digital security, compartmentalized information systems, and operational security protocols that rival intelligence agencies. What these leaked documents did reveal, however, was the sheer scale of the offshore economy. Conservative estimates suggest that at least $32 trillion in private wealth is held in offshore jurisdictions. But this figure only includes assets that can be tracked through conventional banking relationships. The real number, including wealth held through complex trust structures, family office arrangements, and citizenship-based planning strategies, is likely several times larger. The historical context makes this even more disturbing. The modern offshore system wasn't created by accident. It was carefully designed by the same financial dynasties that have controlled global monetary policy for centuries. The Rothschild banking network, established in the 18th century, pioneered many of the techniques still used today for moving wealth across borders while avoiding taxation and regulation. Their innovation wasn't just financial, it was jurisdictional. By establishing banking operations in multiple countries, they could exploit differences in legal systems, tax codes, and reporting requirements to create wealth structures that no single government could effectively regulate. The Rockefeller family perfected this approach in the 20th century, using trusts, foundations, and holding companies to maintain control over vast business empires while minimizing tax obligations and avoiding antitrust enforcement. Their wealth management strategies became templates for subsequent generations of ultra-wealthy families, creating a playbook for generational wealth preservation that remains largely unchanged today. But it's the European banking dynasties that deserve the most attention. Families like the Agnellis, the Wendells, and the de Rothschilds have maintained and expanded their wealth through systems that predate modern nation-states. Their financial structures evolved through monarchies, wars, revolutions, and the rise of democratic governments, adapting to each new regulatory environment, while maintaining their essential function, preserving and multiplying wealth across generations without meaningful tax obligations or regulatory oversight. These historical precedents matter because they reveal something crucial. The offshore economy isn't a recent innovation responding to modern taxation. It's the continuation of wealth management strategies that have operated for centuries. The Swiss banking system, the Luxembourg holding company structures, the Dutch tax treaty networks. All of these were designed by people who understood that true wealth transcends national boundaries and operates according to different rules than the economic systems governing ordinary citizens. Consider the modern evolution of these classical strategies. Today's ultra-wealthy don't just use offshore banks and shell companies. They've embraced technological innovations that make traditional wealth concealment look primitive. Cryptocurrency offers unprecedented opportunities for wealth storage and transfer that operate completely outside conventional banking systems. But we're not talking about Bitcoin transactions that leave permanent blockchain records. We're talking about privacy-focused cryptocurrencies, advanced mixing services, and decentralized finance protocols that can anonymize wealth transfers on a scale impossible with traditional methods. The most sophisticated operators use what insiders call wrapped assets, where traditional wealth is converted into cryptocurrency tokens that represent ownership without revealing the underlying assets or beneficial owners. These tokens can be traded, collateralized, or transferred without triggering traditional reporting requirements because regulatory authorities haven't developed frameworks for tracking wealth that exists primarily as cryptographic code rather than legal entities. Artificial intelligence has added another layer of sophistication to modern wealth concealment. AI-powered trading algorithms can execute complex strategies across multiple markets simultaneously, creating returns that appear to come from different sources, while actually originating from coordinated operations. These systems can also optimize tax strategies in real time, automatically restructuring transactions to minimize tax obligations while maintaining investment returns. The convergence of AI and offshore finance has created what experts call algorithm wealth management, where computer systems manage complex portfolios across multiple jurisdictions, automatically creating and dissolving legal entities, executing trades through different beneficial ownership structures, and optimizing tax outcomes. Without human intervention, the wealth grows and compounds through systems so sophisticated that even their operators may not fully understand how they function. But the most disturbing innovation involves tokenized ownership of real-world assets through blockchain-based systems that operate completely outside traditional legal frameworks. Real estate, art collections, private equity investments, even shares in operating businesses can be converted into digital tokens that trade on decentralized platforms without any connection to the original legal ownership structures. This creates parallel ownership systems where the same assets exist simultaneously in traditional legal frameworks and blockchain-based systems, allowing owners to realize economic benefits while maintaining legal deniability. As we reach the deeper layers of this investigation, I need you to understand something crucial. What I'm revealing isn't just academic information. It's intelligence that could change how you think about money, power, and your place in the global economic system. The people who control these mechanisms don't want you to understand them, because understanding threatens their fundamental advantage. If you're ready to join a community of people who refuse to accept the official narrative about how money really works, subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell. Consider this your invitation into a very different kind of educational experience, one that reveals truths most people will never encounter. The geopolitical implications of the silent vault theory extend far beyond individual tax avoidance. They represent a fundamental challenge to the concept of national sovereignty itself. When the wealthiest individuals can move assets across borders instantly, store wealth in jurisdictions that refuse to cooperate with foreign investigators, and conduct business through entities that exist beyond the reach of any single government, they effectively operate as sovereign entities themselves. This creates what political economists call stateless capital, wealth that acknowledges no national allegiance and recognizes no governmental authority. When financial crises occur, when wars break out, when governments collapse, this stateless capital flows seamlessly to safer jurisdictions, often profiting from the very instability that devastates ordinary citizens. The 2008 financial crisis, the European debt crisis, the COVID-19 pandemic, all of these disruptions created massive wealth transfers from distressed assets into the offshore system, where patient capital could acquire valuable assets at fraction of their normal value. The influence operations made possible by untraceable wealth represent perhaps the most serious threat to democratic governance, when individuals can fund political campaigns, think tanks, media organizations, and academic institutions through complex chains of intermediaries that hide the original source of funding. They can shape public opinion and policy outcomes while maintaining complete anonymity. The offshore system doesn't just facilitate tax avoidance. It enables a form of shadow governance where economic power translates directly into political influence without accountability. Consider how sovereign wealth funds have evolved into instruments of geopolitical influence that operate through many of the same structures used by private wealth. Countries like Norway, Saudi Arabia, and Singapore manage hundreds of billions of dollars through sophisticated investment vehicles that can acquire strategic assets, influence corporate governance, and even affect electoral outcomes in target countries. But because these funds operate through complex offshore structures, their activities often appear as private investment rather than state action. The most sophisticated practitioners of influence operations understand that true power comes not from owning politicians, but from owning the systems that inform and educate them. By funding think tanks, academic research, media organizations, and policy institutes through untraceable offshore contributions, they can shape the intellectual framework within which political decisions are made, the ideas that become conventional wisdom, the experts who appear on television, the research that influences policy decisions. All of this can be influenced by money that flows through systems designed to hide its origins. The technological revolution has amplified these capabilities exponentially. Social media manipulation, computational propaganda, and artificial intelligence-powered influence operations can be funded and coordinated through offshore systems that make attribution virtually impossible. When foreign governments want to influence elections, when corporations want to manipulate public opinion, when ideological movements want to spread their message, the offshore financial system provides the infrastructure necessary to operate at scale while maintaining plausible deniability. But perhaps the most disturbing aspect of the silent vault theory involves what happens when these systems begin to operate autonomously. As artificial intelligence becomes more sophisticated, as blockchain-based smart contracts become more prevalent, as automated trading systems become more complex, we're approaching a point where vast amounts of wealth could be controlled by algorithmic systems that operate according to programmed objectives rather than human decision-making. Imagine autonomous investment funds that can create and dissolve offshore entities, execute complex transactions across multiple jurisdictions, and accumulate wealth and influence without ongoing human oversight. These systems could potentially operate for decades, or even centuries, pursuing objectives programmed by their original creators long after those individuals have died. The wealth could continue growing, the influence operations could continue operating, the market manipulation could continue functioning, all directed by algorithmic systems that exist beyond human control. The implications become even more ominous when you consider how these systems might interact with each other. Multiple autonomous wealth management systems, each programmed with different objectives, could engage in complex competition and cooperation that affects global markets, political outcomes, and social developments in ways that no human fully understands. We could be moving toward a future where much of global economic activity is directed by algorithmic systems pursuing objectives that may not align with human welfare or even human survival. The concentration of wealth enabled by the silent vault theory has reached levels that threaten the stability of democratic institutions and market economies. When a small number of individuals control resources equivalent to the GDP of major nations, when they can move those resources instantly across borders to avoid taxation or regulation, when they can influence political outcomes without accountability, the traditional assumptions underlying democratic governance and market economics no longer apply. The most sophisticated practitioners of these strategies understand that their ultimate objective isn't just wealth preservation or tax avoidance. It's the creation of a parallel civilization that operates according to different rules than the society inhabited by ordinary citizens. They have their own banking systems, their own legal frameworks, their own conflict resolution mechanisms, their own educational institutions, their own media organizations, and increasingly, their own technological infrastructure. This parallel civilization intersects with mainstream society only when necessary and only on terms favorable to its members. When they need to acquire resources, influence outcomes, or access markets, they can do so through intermediaries and structures that hide their involvement. When they need to avoid consequences, resolve disputes, or protect assets, they can retreat into legal and financial structures that operate beyond the reach of normal law enforcement and regulatory oversight. As we approach the conclusion of this investigation, I need you to do something that will demonstrate you understand the full implications of what we've discussed. In the comments below, type the word invisible and share this video with someone who still believes that hard work and fair play determine economic outcomes in our society. Because what you've learned tonight reveals a truth that most people will never accept. We live in a world where two completely different sets of rules apply, where the wealthiest individuals have effectively seceded from the economic and political systems that govern everyone else. The silent vault theory represents more than just an explanation of how the ultra-wealthy manage their finances. It reveals the emergence of a post-democratic, post-national form of economic organization that challenges every assumption we make about fairness, equality, and social contract. When wealth can be stored invisibly, moved instantly, and deployed strategically without accountability, traditional concepts of citizenship, taxation, and democratic governance become obsolete. The philosophical implications are profound and disturbing. If a small group of individuals can effectively opt out of the social contract while continuing to benefit from the infrastructure, stability, and opportunities provided by organized society, what obligations do they have to support the common good? If their wealth grows automatically through systems that ordinary citizens cannot access or even understand, what justification exists for the inequality that results? The silent vault theory suggests that we've already crossed a threshold into a form of technological feudalism where a small aristocracy of capital controls resources and systems that are incomprehensible to the general population. Just as medieval peasants could not understand the legal and economic systems that governed their lives, most modern citizens cannot understand the offshore financial architecture that determines their economic reality. But unlike historical forms of aristocracy, which were limited by geography, technology, and the need for physical control over territory and people, the new aristocracy of capital operates through abstract systems that transcend traditional limitations. They don't need to control land or armies. They control the mathematical algorithms, legal structures, and technological infrastructure that determine how wealth flows through the global economy. The ultimate question raised by the silent vault theory isn't whether these systems will continue to evolve and expand. That trajectory seems inevitable, given the technological and legal innovations that continue to emerge. The question is whether democratic societies can develop institutional responses sophisticated enough to maintain some measure of accountability and social cohesion in the face of such concentrated and invisible power. The answer may determine whether we evolve toward a future where economic and political power become completely separated from democratic accountability, or whether we can develop new forms of governance and regulation sophisticated enough to maintain the possibility of a society based on shared rules and mutual obligations. What we've discovered tonight suggests that time for that choice is running out, and most people don't even realize the choice exists. The silence of the vaults isn't just about hidden wealth. It's about the growing silence of democratic institutions, market mechanisms, and social contracts that can no longer function effectively in the face of power that operates beyond their reach. The theory reveals not just how the rich make money by doing nothing, but how that money, once made, acquires the power to reshape reality itself according to the preferences of those who control it. In the end, the silent vault theory forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth. We may already be living in a world where the fundamental assumptions of democratic capitalism have been quietly superseded by something entirely different, something that most of us cannot see, understand, or influence. The vaults are silent because they don't need to speak. They have already won.